Let me get right to my guest. Let me begin with Dr. Leo Davis. Dr. Leo Davis, for 30 years, has served as the minister of worship at the Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church, Disciples of Christ in Memphis, Tennessee. This is the largest African American congregation within the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ in the United States. Dr. Davis holds a Doctor of Musical Arts, meaning church music and conducting, from the University of Memphis. His book, No Gimmicks 2.0, Relevancy, Commitment, and Excellence in Worship, was re-released in 2018. If you are a minister of music, if you do worship and arts, you want to get that book. No Gimmicks. This is the 2.0 version, okay? Relevancy, Commitment, and Excellence in Worship Ministry. You want to get that book. My second guest is Dr. Braxton Shelley. Dr. Braxton Shelley, hold on just a second here. We've got 3 or 4 different messages going on and things being received. I apologize for that. There's a lot of stuff going on. Dr. Braxton Shelley is a professor of music and arts at, sorry about that. We've just got a lot of stuff going on. He is a professor at Harvard, the Radcliffe Institute specifically. He is a minister, a musician, a musicologist, and the assistant professors in the Department of Music, and the Stanley and William Marks Assistant Professor at Radcliffe, and the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Studies at Harvard. He received his PhD in the history of theory and music at the University of Chicago. I am so excited to have these 2 amazing gentlemen with me, and we're just going to get right to it. And I'm going to start with some questions that I want to ask them. And I'm going to begin with Dr. Shelley. Dr. Shelley, what can the Academy do in your estimation? And then we'll ask the same of Dr. Davis to help the Black church in the areas of music and worship and arts. What do you think the Academy can do?
Well, first, let me thank you for having me today. It's so good to be with you and my good friend, Dr. Davis. I think it's a great question because there are a lot of things that are required to succeed in music and arts ministry, in the Black church in particular. And I think that no single degree program sufficiently prepares individuals to show up on day one and be ready to meet all the demands, to reach across generations, to reach across genres, to be able to fulfill the duties assigned. So I think one of the best things that academic institutions can do is to push their students to other sort of parachurch kind of institutions, and to allow for internships and other sort of field placement activities as a part of music preparation instead of just MDiv work, to allow the students to not just sort of learn music theory, music history, not just sort of applied lessons, but to actually get sort of on the ground training, running rehearsals, doing the kind of work that has to be done behind the scenes in administration, being actually a part of leading Sunday morning activities. And I think that would allow scholarship and practice to work together in a way that forms students who are ready to meet the demands of ministry.
Okay, Dr. Davis, what do you think the Academy could do better, or what more could it do to help the Black church?
Well, I too want to thank you, Dr. Simmons, for this opportunity, and my dear friend, and I've watched grown over the years, Dr. Braxton Shelley. This is an honor and a privilege. You know, I am Dr. Simmons. It took me a minute to accept that my calling with a PhD is to the church.
Mhm.
And I had to say that unashamedly because for many instances, I've talked to Braxton about it. I was kind of ashamed of it or didn't know, if there's
Yeah.
something more. Yeah, I had to really grasp that and understand what my calling was, and excellence can be brought to the church. Now,
Right.
in saying that, with the academy, I think it's important. The academy, I'm not shunning learning. I think learning is important. I think reading is important. I think studying and knowing historically what you're doing and why you're doing, I think all that is important. But you can't beat the practicality of it.
Okay.
You can't beat understanding, as Braxton said, you've got to be in it. You've got to you have to forge these conversations with these young seminarians or persons that are young going into these fields, what the expectations are. What is it like to work with a budget with 1 year it may be up and above and before the funds are snatched away? What is it like to work in conflict management, real conflict? What is it like to work with pastors that are insecure?
Whoa.
What
Okay.
is it like? These are real conversations that we're not having. What is it to do with aging? You're making these demands on you on a millennial congregation, but I got half the members are 80. So how are we working around, these conversations that are real within our churches? The churches are dying. So I think more of the conversations and bringing in the individuals that are doing the work, well,
Right. Okay.
that are doing the work well. And it just brings off just because they're a superstar. I don't mean any harm, you all. But, we get so caught up with, these church. Some are now bringing because of and that's cool if that's working your brand that way. But I'm talking about they're doing the work
Well,
well.
yes. Okay. Okay. So more practical
Yeah,
education for students who are studying, especially, but bringing in people who are
and,
doing the work well. And go ahead, Leo.
and if I may add, that's why I want to congratulate and thank publicly Dr. Braxton Shelley.
Yes.
Dr. Shelley is doing the work well. He's in the trenches. He's working with the churches. He was just at a gospel music workshop last week promoting a fabulous piece with on the ground trenches singers and musicians. So he's doing the work and then going in the top academy to go back and talk about. So that's what I'm talking. That's an example of that mix. That's example.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've seen his work.
Yes.
Also at Hampton. Right.
Yes.
He is definitely doing it all. So Dr. Braxton, when we talk about the academy doing more, are there other things that you can think of that the academy should do more of? Or talk to me about your experience in the academy and how you've tried to bring that to the church.
Got it. It's a point I was going to make in answer to what Leo said a minute ago. I think the difficulty is in bridging the two, right? And the connections, right?
Yeah.
Both between the institutions, but helping individual students figure out how to take what they learn in the classroom and make it applicable in a context. And I think that is in many ways harder than grasping the concept by itself, or harder than just doing the church. And so I think that there needs to be much more in the way of kind of, as if a degree takes 4 years, I think there needs to be a sort of supervised, right, period of 3 or 4 years of sort of really intensive work that allows them to integrate their activity both sort of at school and at church, so that they're not just, I spend, most of my time learning, and then I spend, one summer doing the deed. Phrase that you came up with. My own experience is that I come to the academy from the church. So everything I study, everything I reflect on is something I grew up with.
Right.
And what I have found so interesting is that what is celebrated in the academy is insight, right? But it's an insight that comes because I'm in the stuff, Like, I mean, I can I can translate it into theoretical language, and I can talk about all the things it relates to, and I can formalize it and theorize it. But at base, I can talk about Black preaching or gospel music because I grew up in it, right? I have that sense. And I think one of the important things that has happened, because I've been fortunate, but another thing that can be done, I think, to help students is to value their insights, right? Is to trust that the wisdom they have actually matters. That instinct, that instinct that that they got because they were playing by ear when they were 5, playing for these services, that there's a way that can actually be valuable in the classroom with students that kind of practical background that they do. And so I think in some ways working on the bridge, the connection between the academy, between the church, right? Not viewing one as sort of superior to the other, but viewing the two as necessarily related and linked, would be something that will require, I think, work on both sides of the question. But I think both the academy and the church would benefit, right? That the academy would be enriched by sort of much more in the way of the sort of practical perspective, and the church would be strengthened by having, folks who come that have been prepared, but not prepared sort of without the wisdom that comes from experience.
Okay. Dr. Davis, you said something earlier that I want to go back to. You said you were talking about how do you deal with pastors who, let me say this gently. How do you deal with pastors who are difficult? I'll see some young preachers, some ministers of music rather, who will say, how do you deal with pastors who are jealous of the minister of music? I'm not going that far, but just how do you deal with pastors who are just difficult when it comes to maybe they don't have an understanding of music, and arts? How do you deal with that?
I think the first thing my father taught me, my father, Dr. Simmons, was a minister of music. He was a supervisor for the City Highway Patrol in Chicago, but his love for music superseded that job. We had a music job, and I learned so many valuable principles from my dad. And one principle my dad taught me was always respect the seat. He said, I don't care who sits in it.
Okay.
He said, I don't care who sits in the seat. He said, respect the seat. And I think that has been part of the successes that I've had. I'm talking, I'll just refer to my experience of 30 years at Mississippi Boulevard, and then before that, 2 other congregations. I remember, I won't refer to the church or wherever it was, there was a minister where I was working back in my young days, where I was working, and the choir, I was developing the choir, and he made a statement one time before when we were going through the worship service. He says, don't sing that song because the congregation will be shouting all over everywhere, and I won't be able to hardly get up and get a word in or say anything. And I recognized then the point of intimidation or what that felt like for him. In essence, I think the important things is always number one is know how to respect the seat.
Okay. I
have a pastor that I could probably be, in terms of age, I could be probably classified as his father in terms of age. Our pastor's very young. But not once have I referred to him by his first name or made it in any uncomfortability as to, because of my seniorship as statesman, or I've been here so long, so you can only tell me. I respect the seat of that office. So once we're respecting that seat, I think even in dealing with persons that are, if you're dealing with a person like that or dealing with a person that's insecure, find ways to build them up, but also, I didn't say bend over backwards either, but learn a way to be supportive, but be who you are.
Okay.
Still be excellent in what you do. It will not, let me tell you something. I am a witness. What you do, and when you do it the right way, it's going to carry you through.
That's right.
It's going to carry you through.
Excellence will carry you through.
Yeah. Let them carry it, because when you focus on, well, they're not like, that's not your issue. That's theirs.
Okay.
You focus on what the job is that you're called to do, and make sure that it's right every time that you move. My father said, you don't have to talk about how great you are and what you do. When you stand before that choir or you sit on, that speaks for you. People, they make up in their mind their decision about you. When you sit down to do what you're called to do. That's all it is. The congregation will cover you. Congregation will cover you. You ain't got to worry about that. And if it is time to separate, if it is time to make that change because of difficulties, hey, it's been a good journey. You move on. But I want to say this. I think the best way is to respect the seat. Somehow that lowers the anxiety. I have seen it. When they see that you're giving respect to the seat, because some of it is what musicians do. You know, we've got 49 personalities going on. So, you know, Braxton, we just got one
Dr.
day.
Davis said that. I didn't say that.
One day we got one thing going on at 12, and at 5 it'll be something else.
Yeah.
So, we have to bring all of those energies in, and the pastors are creative types too. So we just have to learn how. I think it's the learning out of the mutual respect and having the conversations. Those are tough conversations.
Yeah, those are tough conversations.
And you got to make and tend relationships. I remember.
Go ahead, say more, Dr. Shelley.
The first time I think the first time I met Dr. Davis actually was you were doing a plenary at Hampton,
right?
And Dr. Thomas was the morning preacher, which meant that you had to miss his sermon, right? In order to give you a talk, right? But you made it clear, right, that you were supporting him, but you couldn't be there and do your talk at the same time. And that was after having worked together for years. And so I think that's an example that relationships don't get made overnight, and that they can be made vulnerable by one misstep. And so if that is sort of one of the most important relationships in the church between the pastor and the minister of worship, then you have to tend it. You have to guard it and to take custody of it. Because if it's not working, it can really harm.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Because if it's not working, it will be obvious to
Right.
people on Sunday morning if there's tension there that hasn't been addressed.
That's absolutely right. Dr. David, you had something else you wanted to say. Go ahead.
Yeah, he hit it right on the head. You got to work at it, and you got to, it just has to be worked at. It's something. It's a work in progress. It really is, because a lot of it is trust issues from past stuff.
Yeah.
It really isn't even about you. It's sometimes halftime it's past stuff that somebody else has done or somebody else in the family. I mean, it's just all this stuff triangulates. It just gets into one thing, connects to something else. So it's really not about that. I'm glad he mentioned though about whatever the discombobulation is or whatever it is, the congregation can't see it. There have been issues I don't agree with some of the former pastors and pastors I've worked with, but my effort has been never to let the congregation to see that.
Great.
Not that I'm working in an attitude of false or hypocrisy. That's not it, but I'm working in an area of truth to being supportive. Truth is support. I believe support you're truthful, you walk in support.
And it's their call if they're the senior pastor ultimately, whether I agree with it or not.
Exactly.
That's it. That's it.
Say that again, Dr. Shelley.
That's it.
It's their call, whether I agree with it or not.
That's it.
That's their call.
That's it.
Right.
And there will be occasions where it won't work, right? And it's obvious that you were right in your, but you surrender, right to the seat, as Leo said.
Exactly. Dr. Shelley, say something about how we can nuance our definitions of success to reflect the wide differences in resources. We've got rural churches, we've got mega churches, and everything in between. What does success begin to look like in terms of worship and arts and music today? How can we better kind of nuance that definition when we look at, because, you've got small churches with very limited resources. They might have 5 members in a rural church. They're all over 70. They've got a musician that comes in and out. and then you've got mega church. What we're all talking about making our music departments, our worship and arts departments successful. Talk to me about that.
So it's a great question. I mean, I think, these days on Sunday morning, my entire Facebook feed, right, is everybody's church going live.
Yes.
And it's wonderful, right? It makes it available if I want to stay at Bedside Baptist to do that. But there is a kind of, competition and improper comparison, right, that can, be bred by that. So I think, we have to look for solutions that work in the house we're in. And one of my mentors, Dr. Raymond Wise, I hope he won't be mad if I say this, but we talked about years ago, people telling him, you can make anybody sing. You can make rock sing. And he joked, well, because if I have rocks, I pick rock music. But there is a wisdom there, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Excellence that can be achieved everywhere does not look the same, right? You can't look at what Leo does at Mississippi Boulevard after having spent 30 years building a choir and expect that you're going to do that with 10 choir members the first year you get there.
Right.
You can't call that failure if you can't do what it took him 30 years to do.
Exactly.
Failure of your own or failure of the people you're called to lead. And so I think making and achieving reasonable goals, figuring out how to be inspired by the places that are doing the very best practices, but tempering that by the resources that are available, resources, financial resources in terms of human capital, all of that. How do you define excellence when you have, 25 average singers? And I think you can have an excellent music ministry, right? If you build a model that works there, but it can't be Leo's model, right?
Right.
It can't be Oscar's model at the Potter's house. It can't, it has to be a model that lifts the people. Because I have a sense that I think in general, people want to be a part of things that are going well. In general, people will push back at the challenge at the same time as they will be inspired when they find themselves doing something they didn't think they could do. And so I think that whatever you inherit, you can make better, but you can't make it better by expecting it to turn into something that just doesn't fit. That is literally impossible, right? Aiming for impossibility will demoralize the people instead of inspiring them.
So when you're working with students at Harvard, what kind of discussions do you all have about if you play for or you work in a rural church? Do you all have those kinds of discussions?
Well, I had an interesting class. I had a gospel class last semester, and actually one of the students in the course was an MDiv student, and the singer, choir director, and preacher actually from Georgia. And so this is a person who's been in a lot of different churches, and we talked about how on the one hand, the goal, right, remains consistent, right, to offer ministry that brings people in contact with the presence of God, right, that makes that sets the table to receive the Word of God, to join and to experience in community, right, what they believe in their hearts. That is the same across, right, the various churches that he'd been a part of. But how that can be achieved and what it can look like was so different, so varied. In multiple churches that he could visit at the same time. And so we talked about how to be nimble, right? And this happens, I see this, and Leo does this too, right? As a workshop clinician, you never know what the first night's going to be. You never know, you go with a grand plan, you send the music ahead of you,
Right.
And you get there, you're like, oh God,
You preaching. You preaching.
what are we going to be able to do, right?
Right.
But I think that if you are the leader, it is your job to figure out what's possible, right?
Okay.
And then to lead, right? That to administrate, right? To minister, right? To the people, to the group that was going to offer ministry, to prepare them, right? To sort of lead the rest of the congregation. And that just requires, I think, a lot of ongoing discernment about, am I trying to do this program because I saw Leo do it?
Right.
Am I trying to do this song
because I heard it on the radio?
Right. Is there any actual theology in this song that I'm trying to do from the radio?
Right.
Or is this a song that's going to bless the people, right? I mean, I think that you have to exegete your congregation, right, as a music minister, as much as you have to do as a pastor, right? Is this going to work? Even if the choir can sing it, right?
Right.
Are the 75-year-olds sitting in this church going to get anything out of this?
Okay.
And if not, is it ministry?
Whoa, is it ministry? Okay. So you just took me to another area, and I think, Dr. Davis, you alluded to it slightly earlier. So what do? You're out for excellence, but let's say you've got a choir that's basically filled with people who are 60, 70, 80. Okay. And you're out for excellence, and younger people are coming into the church, and this is your main choir. So how do you start to get at some of working, I guess it is, across generations, and I'm not talking about forming 5 choirs.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And I'm not saying let's put a praise and worship team over here and we'll get to the choir every now and then.
Yeah.
But talk to me now. It's 2019, and you've got resources, but you also do a lot of work as a clinician, working with small churches. So talk to me about how you tell people to wrestle with that thing, especially around aging choir.
Yeah. I have learned, I'm going to tell you what and who really taught me this principle, how I learned it well. When I started graduate school in 1986, my master's in organ and conducting at University of Massachusetts, Lowell, I got the call about a church job in Boston. I was an excited, happy camper because I was a poor grad student up in the Northeast.
Okay.
Charles Street AME Church. I went to Charles Street under then the pastor, Reverend McCarl Thomas, and we worked. And I met that choir, and the average age at that time, probably 60. Older voices I could not imagine. Here I was a young 29, 28-year-old. And they were twice my age. 2 men, 2 tenors, and 1 bass. And the remainder of lovely ladies, total about an ensemble about 30. I learned more about relationship. I won't get into that. I learned about how being a true choir master, minister of music required more than music. It was building relationships. But I learned also how to find repertoire that suited their voices.
Right.
And that they did well. Irregardless. That was, covered the principles of theologically sound, musically apt that they could do. Of course, I knew I didn't have voices to do the Messiah. But by the time, within a year's time, we had gathered other singers because what we had done was good music, good standard gospel music. A few anthems that we attempted were unison. Unison singing. Braxton shared this one time. Unison singing, Dr. Shelley, I'm sorry. Unison singing can be some of the most beautiful singing if it's done right.
That's right.
And so some of those people were, so by the time we graduated, maybe a year and a half or 2 years for a major AME function that was happening at the church, and our choir was the guest, they did King Jesus is a Listening by William Dawson. You would have thought it was the Verdi Requiem. Because they had got to, we can sing 4 parts. We're doing King Jesus is a Listening, the different things coming in. So it's about, as Braxton, you've got to really be patient and nurture and work what's well. knowing what's worked well with the resources that you have. Sometimes it will, sometimes it will grow and you will attract it. Sometimes it won't.
Sometimes it won't.
Sometimes it won't. That's the reality. We can't paint the picture that says, excellence does attract. And if you do a good job, it will give you some credence. It will give you some growth, but it may not be the growth that you expect. I was blessed at Mississippi Boulevard. Let me say this. When I came, I thank God for the 30 years, but when I arrived, Dr. Simmons and Dr. Shelley at Mississippi Boulevard in August of 1989, when I walked in the first rehearsal, there were already 130 choir members sitting there.
Right.
So I didn't come in and start and say it grew under me. Gail Jones Murphy created a platform where it was solid. I had a solid foundation when I arrived to take it from there. So everybody, everyone's not afforded that opportunity. But I would say those experiences, like I said, at Charles Street and others where the numbers were not, I've learned how to, and as he used the example of workshops, I just had a workshop not long ago where I had this music selected, sent it in and was told, oh yes, they can do this, and could not perform.
They could not do that.
Had to make immediate changes. And sometimes we do that. And we have to do that now with our current, even with resources and choirs. It doesn't always pop off the way we think it should, or the way others think.
You have to be nimble.
You gotta
be nimble. You said something very briefly that I want you to say more about. Say more about this notion of, and this has always, of course, been a discussion in the church, but I think it's more so now. Say more about the theology that's in what we sing, and the kinds of things we put together in worship and arts departments, performances, whether they be in dance, spoken word, etc., using banners, etc. Say a bit about our theology and how you address that as a clinician in your classrooms, and as a musician.
Right. I think it all stems with
Leo. Let's go to Dr. Shelley.
I'm sorry. Thank
you. No problem. Go to Dr. Shelley.
I'm going to do next.
Make me think of.
So, I think, I guess if you add it up, and add up all the time that's spent singing, right, on Sunday morning, it almost always far outpaces the length of the sermon, right? So most of the Sunday morning is the singing, right?
All right.
That's it.
And if Sunday morning is about helping people build a faith that can carry them through the week, then that just guarantees, right, that we have, right, to have music that actually has a content, right, that's meaningful, right? That's not just one word over and over, or that's not some sort of, argument that is pseudo-theological, right? But that doesn't have a kind of grounding. So I think both as somebody who selects music for worship and as a composer, I think for me it all begins with, right, what is the point of this song? What is the message? Right? What is to be received from this, right? I think Augustine said that singing was praying twice. And I think, there's a way that music, right, both as a composer and as someone programming, somebody picking the songs, you are putting words in people's mouths, right? This is the one frame where I think that can be helpful, right? And so the question is, what words are you going to give them to sing, right? Are you going to give them something that they can use to process the difficulties of their lives, something they can use to understand what they mean? And I think this is not just about, the adult members of the congregation, right? But I think about, the memory I have of hymns, right? There are dozens of hymns for which I just know all 4 verses, right? I grew up in, they sang them all, and you had to sing all the verses.
Yes, we did.
Trying to learn them, right? But, I know the last verse of, my hope is built on nothing less, right? Because I heard them sing, when he shall come with trumpet sound, oh, may I then in him be found, right? Over and over. And so I think that what's happening in the singing is literal faith formation, right? And we have the benefit that it's set to melody, it's set to harmony. And that, right, grounds itself in people's memories in a way that the sermon may not.
Right.
And so I think there's a really high mandate, right, to pick music, to write music, to program stuff that is theologically sound, that can carry people, right, into the world, knowing what it means to be a Christian.
And Dr. Davis, now with that said, so let's say you've got a group of 20-year-olds and they just heard Ty Tribbett or James Fortune or whoever just put out this great song, and the theology in it is just totally ridiculous.
Yeah.
How do you talk to them about not singing this song that sounds great? Everybody's singing and etc., but the theology is just bad.
Right.
What do you do?
I've been in a situation like that. What I've done is not to, because they're not millennials. I hate to use that term like that, but they're just not going to hear it. If you try to talk anywhere about it, they're not going to hear it. So my thinking was to go and get another piece just as attractive with the theology that I needed it to have. But it had the same energy, and literally almost forgot about it because they were like, "Oh yeah, that's cool. That's trendy. That works, and that has what I need in it." And then talk about it.
Okay.
I don't address the other song at all.
Okay. There we
talk about it. Because see, if I go against what they love and what they like, automatically they shut me off. I don't take the hand. I don't want to hear it. So find the opposite with that. I want to tag on what Braxton said. Dr. Jimmy Abington said one time, the importance of studying theologically. I learned so much working with him with this new hymnal that we put out, but studying text theologically, making sure it's sound. We sing about, or we teach, and as Braxton writes, we write and we sing about, and I teach about who I believe God is.
Right.
So what I believe God is, I'm having the congregation to sing it because this is my choice. You see, it's Leo's choice. It's Braxton's choice. So I have not only the choir, but I have the congregation singing things of what I believe about God. So we have to make sure those areas I have to make sure those areas are checked very carefully, constantly. Sometimes we don't, but we don't do it enough. But to make sure my relationship, that I have clear channels of understanding, that I'm not angry at God or pissed at, about something.
Right.
That's the reality of it. Because that comes out.
Yep.
That's right.
It will come out.
You're doing faith formation for the people.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. That was very helpful, I think, for a lot of people, given some of the comments I'm getting. I think that was very, very helpful. Let's go back to and this is for both of you, for Dr. Shelley and first, and then for Dr. Davis. Between the church and the academy, what are some of the other resources available to ministers of music and worship and arts folk? Tell me about some resources. People always want to know about resources. Talk to me about resources that you know of, Dr. Shelley.
Well, there are lots of, really great sort of opportunities annually to be developed as a music ministry professional. I'm thinking about the Gospel Music Worship of America, which Leo alluded to a minute ago. We were just there a couple of weeks ago. National Convention of Gospel Choirs and Gospel Choruses. The major denominations have music auxiliaries, National Baptist, Progressive, so forth and so on. Hampton University Ministers Conference has they have courses for everyone as a part of the Choir Directors Organist Guild Workshop. But for undergraduate and graduate students, there's a really fantastic program called the W. James Abington Church Music Academy. It's been going on now, I think, 20 years. Next year will be the 20th year. And it is a kind of parallel conference where sort of young music ministry professionals are formed, right, through sort of intensive teaching and classes and relationships.
Where does this conference, where is it usually held, Doc?
So this is at the same time as the Hampton Ministers Conference.
Okay, it's during Hampton.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
And so there's just a small group of academy interns, 15 or something like that, who come from across the country and get to sit under amazing sort of instruction. They get to go to a selected number of the regular conference events. They are at the, sort of nightly services and all of that. But during the day, they're in classes, sort of being taught about music ministry, about sort of how to think about their future, about how to sort of connect to individuals who might be helpful to them. And in that group of the past 20 years, there's really an amazing sort of, cadre of folks who've gone on to do amazing things. I was in the Church Music Academy for several years. Professor Brandon Boyd, who's a professor at University of Missouri in Columbia.
One of my folks from the lectionary. Exactly.
Yes. Nathaniel Gums, who's the director of chapel music at Yale. He's an alum. Carlos Simon, who's teaching at Morehouse, he's a composer.
No, Carlo, yes.
So like there's quite an amazing group of Academy alums. And this is a program that goes on every year right now. Dr. Emmett Price is the director of the Academy. Marcus Garrett, he is a professor at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. It goes on and on. And these are folks who are both in the Academy and the church. And this is a program that doesn't cost them anything.
And so how do young people get information? And if they want to be an intern or, something like that, how do they get information on this?
Oh, they could email me. They could email Leo. They could email Dr. Emmett Price. It's a lot of information about the program.
Okay.
I will. What I'll do is I'll send you the email for the official person to contact.
Right.
You can share that on your social media platforms.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Anything else, Dr. Davis? Are there any other resources you want to share with people?
I think Dr. Shelley has covered. As I want to again push the Church Music Academy, and let me say these are resources, and this is not to negate the resources that we are mentioning are open to the Church Music Academy is more lending to, I said, more the trained musician that's heading towards a career, possibly teaching in a degree program. I'm glad he mentioned the Gospel Music Workshop of America. There's the Dorsey Convention. There are other areas these are other seminars that you can go. If you're not a music reader, I do want to encourage you to get it. We're not trying to make you a concert pianist or anything, but those are, the more you know, the more streams of income.
All right.
If there were some information I could have gotten Dr. Simmons 20 years, 30 years ago, it would have been to streams of income. Okay. And I want to encourage these young musicians to that. Those of you dedicated to church, you don't want to do anything, but there's so much more. Get your streams of income and secure your retirement. Now we could just stop right there.
No, well, let's not stop right there. Say a little bit more.
I worry about the culture of musicians now that we're not careful. Don't expect the church to take care of you. I'm just sorry. I'm going to say it.
That's the truth. Yeah. It's the truth.
They're not going to do it. They can't afford to do it.
Yes.
They're trying to, with the plans, and some of us are fortunate to have retirement plans. But I want to encourage the retirement plans and streams of income. If you have a gift of writing songs, if you have a gift, just like Dr. Shelley, he's multi-layered. He teaches in the academy. He's writing music. He's publishing books. I'm learning the publishing books. I'm learning, finally grasping under those things. Grab some other essentials. Outside of the conferences, there are a plethora of musicians that are available. Donald Lawrence announced at the National Convention of Choruses and Gospel Choirs and Choruses, which was fabulous last year. My first time going last week. He announced that he is leading and overseeing the Edwin Hawkins Seminar. It was a major component for the Edwin Hawkins ministry for many years. It was a great seminar. Donald Lawrence will be facilitating that April 30th through May 3rd in Copenhagen, Denmark. Now, can you just imagine what the brilliance that he has and taking it outside of the country? Now, of course, everybody can't afford that, but there are certainly other ways that you can connect with a Dr. Braxton Shelley. This is a prime source that we have. You can connect with me, others that are working in the field, the names that he's mentioned, the Church Music Academy. They're just a plethora of resources, but I think what we've mentioned would start there. Get to learn and to grow somehow. Not recording praise breaks every time you turn around. I don't mean any harm.
Leaving.
It's like it's like but a praise break.
Yeah. Yes. Everything is yes. Yeah. Well,
everything is.
You know what? But that's because people do often what they do best. Okay. And I do mean that. Which is why I asked.
And please don't. I'm not negating
what I'm saying
anybody's theology, because I love giving God praise.
No, but I'm saying, I think, like I said, people do often what they do best because that's the narrow confines
of
what they know.
Yes.
And they operate well within those confines.
Yes.
And I think what you all have helped, what I hope so many who are viewing this, and for those who will view this over the course of the next couple of weeks, because people tend to view my broadcast over a couple of weeks, is that they will begin to think in a wider sense about how to serve the church, about how to do worship. Think about in wider ways about streams of incomes and retirement and other things. So I think people will appreciate everything that you've said. But since you talked about this whole notion of a praise break, let's do 20 seconds of praise, those kinds of things. Talk to me a bit about how you have been able to, I guess, handle or address the whole notion of, because the last 15, 20 years have just been filled with this notion of, and we all appreciate praise, but some would say that the last 15 or 20 years have been too saturated with how many ways can we do praise breaks, as opposed to what kind of faith formation can we really give to people that's going to help carry them on the journey. Dr. Shelley, say something about that. Dr. Shelley first, and then we're going to close with Dr. Davis on it.
Okay. I'll be quick because I want to hear what Dr. Davis has to say. He's just going on with it today. Right. It's funny because Leo can cut a rug, but anyway, I think I did a talk at Hampton this year for the Music Guild, and I think I was trying to remember what I said. Oh, I know. There's this phrase that I often hear. There is a sound.
Yeah.
Yes.
There is a sound. There is a sound, and I think that's a lie. I don't think that God's worship can be reduced to a sound.
A sound, right?
The praise of the rich and varied church that is the Black church can be reduced to a sound.
Right.
I've been to Mississippi Boulevard on Sunday morning, and the spirituals are done in such a way, right, that you're ready to run around the church.
Yes.
Spiritual, right? There is not a sound.
Right.
And I think that what that phrase and some of the excesses of contemporary music ministry perhaps demonstrate is this a narrow view, right?
Yes.
Of what is music for worship, of what God will inhabit, right?
Right.
God inhabits the praises of God's people, right? But that doesn't mean there's one praise, that the praise is just the praise break, but I think God inhabits the hymns and the anthems and the gospel and
right.
And God inhabits sometimes when there aren't any words, and it's just playing by itself. I think God is omnipresent. and God can show up anywhere God wants to. And I think that we aren't just trying to constrict God when we say there is a sound, but we are also, I think, pushing people out who don't worship like we do, right? Who don't respond to what we respond to when we say there is a sound, because we're really saying there is only my sound, or only my sound matters.
And they say the same thing about Black preaching. There is a sound, and we are as different as from Jasper Williams to Dr. Martin Luther King, but they still say there is a sound. Yeah,
right. And when that happens, it's not about the sound. It's not about God. It's about the person doing the saying, right?
That's right.
Making an idol of their own preferences. But I'm done.
Okay, Dr. Davis, close us out. Talk to us a little bit about
praise is cultural. Worship transcends. I think praise is cultural. If I come into a particular culture, their praise is different. I remember going to a Haitian church in Boston, and the praise was totally different. It was the African, the shout dance, and they were in a circle. It was just so different. This praise is cultural. And I think we have to keep in mind, I love praise. I grew up in a Pentecostal church, and my dad was Baptist, at a minister of music at a Baptist church. So I heard the Dr. Watts hymns and anthems. I learned that tradition from my father, but I couldn't wait to go on Sunday nights with my grandmother to Beverly Temple Church of God in Christ, because it was like popcorn and a Pepsi Coke. I didn't know they were going to flip over. If she could come, they would sing, "Have you tried Jesus? He's all right." And it would be 30 minutes.
Yes.
But I learned about the fervency of that. I learned it was the spirit behind it, as it was the spirit behind the Dr. Watts. So I learned how to respect those. And I think I think what we're missing, what I'm afraid of, I don't go against it, because I love Mississippi Boulevard. I love how we praise. Let me go to this way. I think it's important to us as leaders that we train our musicians. Our musicians have to be trained. We allow them to get away. They set the standard. They set the pattern. So they go on and on and on. Our musicians are trained. Mississippi Boulevard, they're involved with the anthems, those that play by ear, as well as the hymns.
Okay.
Say, for instance, Sunday, the hymn is Holy, Holy, Holy. Now, I've done something different. Normally, the pipe organ will do the interlude. And then I've got the interlude pegged where they're going to be playing the interlude with me. When we do the interlude, that's where they're coming in. And then the reharmonization on the last verse, they're playing. So what I'm saying is they're incorporated in. It's not us, and then they do the high music, and then we're gonna have church.
Exactly.
No, all of it is the worship experience.
Good.
They play anthems. Maybe a certain part of the anthems I'll arrange and figure out and put on an MP3 if they don't read, or write a chart out that they can figure it and participate in. So I think once we raise the level of our musicians, is what I'm trying to say, we give more. I constantly preach to our musicians too. We're not Pentecostal. So when we do praise break, now I'm just saying, this is my experience. We're not Pentecostal. Our culture is not Pentecostal, Mississippi Boulevard. So when we do a praise break, I tell them, hit it and get off of it, because you don't see them running around dancing. So you got to know your culture.
That's right. That's right.
You know the culture of where you are serving. If the presence of the Lord evokes that, and you're the church that does that, okay, that's cool to do that, but be able to do more, shift and move the people beyond that. I hope I'm making sense.
Yep.
Everybody, they don't agree with what I'm saying, but
no, they don't have to agree. No, this is about sharing.
Right. I don't want to look at, let me just say this to you all now, and I'm sure some of you are going to text me. I don't want to look at every time I see your church and it's a praise break. Is there something more? There's got to be something more. Musically, there's something more, that you got the talent. I'm seeing it. Every time you're going to show me something and I'm looking, it's a praise break.
Yeah.
There's more. And that's why I'm saying, attach yourself to people that are getting. Kevin Bond is one of the highlights. He may not, Kevin is, I don't see him as much, and I don't know Kevin Bond's schedule in Atlanta, but one of the most genius, gifted producers, and learned and constantly researching and understanding the why of what we do. And that's what we have to get to, the why of what we do.
The why of what we do, and also just expanding your base of knowledge, getting the exposure,
right,
so that you can understand,
Right.
and like I said, infuse congregations with a wide variety
Exactly.
instead of this narrow understanding,
Right.
which may be all you've been exposed
Right.
to. Our time is up, and this has just been wonderful. I mean, I started in church, in choirs, a cappella choirs. I loved music. I don't sing as much as I used to, but I love music. I love worship and art. And I think they are such a significant part of the African American experience in this country. So I just can't thank the two of you enough. I think you have helped so many, especially young musicians and probably some older ones too, who are trying to do the work that you all do. We thank God for what you all do in your spheres of influence. We thank God for you. And as always, for those who are listening, thank you for tuning in for another session of Preaching and Preachers. Monday, I'll be back at the regular time, if the Lord says the same, noon Eastern Standard Time. And as I always close and say, share the video. Share the video. If it helped you, it will help someone else. If it didn't help you, you probably know someone who it will help. For God's sake, please share the video. Have a great week, each other. Again, Dr. Shelley and Dr. Leo Davis of Mississippi Boulevard. God bless, and thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you.